I always knew my mom favored my sister Lily. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But when she announced her engagement to Ryan, it felt like the world tilted off its axis. Ryan was my ex-boyfriend. We dated for 3 years before breaking up, and while the relationship wasn't perfect, I never imagined my sister would end up with him. To make things worse, she didn't even tell me herself. I found out through a family dinner when she waltzed in, flashing her engagement ring and gushing about how Ryan had proposed. The air left my lungs as I sat there, frozen, while everyone else clapped and cheered. Mom, of course, was ecstatic. She immediately began talking about venues, dresses, and flowers, completely ignoring the fact that I was sitting there in silent shock. My dad, always the quiet one, gave me a concerned glance, but he didn't say anything. And Lily? She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "I hope you're happy for us," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness that felt more like a taunt. I wasn't happy. I was furious, hurt,
Betrayed.
I left the dinner early, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't even begin to process. The drive home was a blur of tears and angry thoughts.
How could she do this to me?
How could he? I didn't sleep that night, replaying every moment of our breakup, every conversation I'd had with Lily about how hard it was to move on. She knew everything. And now she was marrying him. The next morning I called Mom. I needed her to understand how deeply this hurt me. "How can you be okay with this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mom sighed, her tone dismissive. "Sweetheart, it's been years since you and Ryan broke up. You need to move on. Lily's happy, and that's what matters." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What about me? Doesn't my happiness matter? "Of course it does," she said, but her words felt hollow. "But you can't hold on to the past. Ryan loves Lily now, and she loves him. You should be supportive." Supportive? Of my sister marrying the man who once told me he loved me? I hung up, unable to listen to any more. Over the next few weeks, the wedding planning went into overdrive. Invitations were sent out, including one for me. I shoved it into a drawer unopened. Mom called every other day, trying to guilt-trip me into helping with the preparations. Each time, I refused. It all came to a head when Mom invited me over for a chat. I knew it wasn't going to be pleasant, but I went anyway, hoping for some sort of resolution. Instead, she ambushed me. Lily was there, along with Ryan. "We need to talk this out," Mom said, her tone firm. "This family can't function with all this tension." I looked at Lily, expecting an apology, or at least an acknowledgement of what she'd done. But she just crossed her arms and said, "I don't see why this is such a big deal. You weren't even serious about him." Her words hit me like a slap. "Not serious? We were together for 3 years, Lily. And now we're together," she said, her tone unapologetic. "People move on, you should too." I turned to Ryan, hoping for, I don't know, something. But he just shrugged, like this was all perfectly normal. That's when I realized I was alone in this. Mom wasn't on my side. Lily certainly wasn't. And Ryan? He was a coward. "I can't support this," I said, standing up. "And I won't." Mom's face darkened. "If you don't support your sister's wedding, don't bother coming around here anymore." It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "You're cutting me off?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I'm choosing my family," she said. "And if you can't be part of that, then yes." I left without another word, tears streaming down my face. The first few weeks after Mom's ultimatum were like walking through a fog. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally, had chosen my sister over me. And for what? A wedding? I wanted to believe she didn't mean it, that she'd call me and apologize, but the days stretched into weeks, and the phone never rang. I tried to keep busy. Work became my escape, a place where I could lose myself in tasks and deadlines. My friends rallied around me, offering support and plenty of wine-fueled venting sessions. They couldn't believe the situation either. "Who does that?" my best friend, Kara, asked one night. "There's a girl code, and your sister broke every rule in the book." It felt good to have people on my side, but it didn't erase the ache. Every time I saw a family picture on social media or heard someone mention family, it felt like a fresh wound. I'd always been close to my mom, even if she favored Lily. Losing that connection was like losing a part of myself. Then came the bachelorette party. I wasn't invited, of course, but photos flooded my Instagram feed. Lily surrounded by friends and family, laughing and holding a bride-to-be sash. Mom was there, too, grinning like nothing was wrong. It was like I didn't exist. The final straw came when I bumped into an old family friend at the grocery store. "I heard about Lily's wedding," she said, her tone cheerful. "You must be so excited for her." I forced a smile and nodded, but inside, I was seething. It was one thing for Lily and Ryan to act like I didn't matter, but the fact that Mom was going along with it? That hurt the most. A week before the wedding, I got a text from Dad. It was short and to the point. "I think you should come to the wedding. For the family." I stared at the screen, my emotions a storm of anger and sadness. Did he really think I could just show up and pretend everything was fine? That I could watch my sister marry the man who used to be mine? I texted back, "I can't. I'm sorry." His reply came minutes later. "I understand, but your mom won't. Be prepared for that." I didn't need to prepare. I already knew. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. I tried not to think about what was happening, but it was impossible. Images of Lily in her white dress, Ryan waiting at the altar, Mom beaming with pride, all of it played in my mind like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. That evening, I got a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was cold, full of barely contained anger. "You've made your choice, and now I've made mine. Don't expect to be welcome here anymore." I sat there, the phone in my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. What had I done to deserve this? The silence that followed Mom's voicemail was deafening. I replayed her words, each one cutting deeper than the last. She hadn't just chosen Lily. She had exiled me, her own daughter, because I refused to put on a mask and pretend everything was okay. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the walls, wondering if I'd overreacted or if I was justified in standing my ground. But the thing about betrayal is that it festers. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the wedding or even Ryan. It was about a lifetime of being the second choice, the afterthought. I'd always known Mom had a soft spot for Lily, but I never thought that favoritism would lead to this, her cutting me out like I was disposable. I didn't hear from anyone in my family for weeks after that. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from their lives entirely. But the world didn't stop spinning, even if mine felt like it had. Work deadlines piled up, the rent needed paying, and my friends refused to let me wallow for too long. Kara dragged me out for drinks one night, determined to cheer me up. "You know what you need," she said, swirling her margarita with a tiny straw. "Closure. You can't keep letting this eat at you." "Closure?" I scoffed. "How do I get closure from people who don't even care that they hurt me?" "You don't get it from them," she said, leaning closer. "You get it for yourself. Write them a letter, scream into a pillow, throw darts at a picture of Ryan, whatever it takes. But you've got to let it out."
Kara was right.
I couldn't keep carrying this anger around like a suitcase full of bricks. That night, I sat down with a blank notebook and started writing. I didn't filter myself or worry about how it sounded. I just let the words flow. I wrote about how much it hurt when Lily started dating Ryan, how betrayed I felt that she didn't even warn me. I wrote about Mom's dismissiveness, how she brushed off my pain like it was nothing. I wrote about how lonely it felt to be cast aside by the people who were supposed to love me the most. By the time I finished, the notebook was soaked with tears, but I felt lighter. I didn't plan to send the letter. It was just for me, a way to process everything. But fate had other plans. A week later, I ran into Lily at the coffee shop near my apartment. She was glowing, still riding the high of her honeymoon. She spotted me before I could slip away and waved me over. I considered pretending I hadn't seen her, but a part of me, maybe the masochistic part, wanted to hear what she had to say. I walked over, keeping my expression neutral. "Hey," she chirped, as if nothing had happened. "It's been a while. How are you?" "Fine," I said, my voice clipped. You? Great, she said, flashing a smile. The honeymoon was amazing. You should have seen the beaches in Bali. Ryan and I. Lily, I interrupted, my patience napping. Do you even realize what you've done? Or do you just not care? Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. You stole my boyfriend. You married him. And then you stood by while Mom cut me out of the family for not pretending to be okay with it. She frowned, crossing her arms. Ryan wasn't your boyfriend anymore. You broke up years ago. And as for Mom, that's between you and her. It's not my fault you can't let go. Her words hit like a slap. She truly didn't see, or didn't care, how her actions had affected me. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like what you did was normal, like it didn't hurt me. I can't change the past, she said with a shrug. But I'm not going to apologize for being happy. I stared at her, my chest tightening. There was no point in arguing with her. She'd made her choice, just like Mom had. I walked away without another word, my hands trembling as I clutched my coffee. That encounter solidified what I already knew. I couldn't keep waiting for apologies that would never come. The following weekend, I decided to clear out some old boxes in my closet. It was one of those chores I'd been avoiding for ages, but it felt cathartic to clean out the clutter in my life, both physical and emotional. In one of the boxes, I found an old photo album. Flipping through it, I saw pictures of family vacations, birthdays, and holidays. There was one of me and Lily as kids, grinning from ear to ear as we held up matching Christmas sweaters. Another of Mom and me baking cookies in the kitchen. I stared at those photos, feeling a mix of nostalgia and sadness. Those moments felt so far away now, like they belonged to a different life. I realized I'd been holding on to this idea of family that no longer existed, or maybe never really did. The next morning, I booked a therapy session. If I was going to move forward, I needed help figuring out how. My therapist, a kind woman named Angela, listened patiently as I poured out the whole story. You've been through a lot, she said, her voice gentle. It's okay to grieve the relationships you've lost, even if those people are still alive. Her words stuck with me. Grieving people who were still alive. It sounded strange, but it made sense. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my relationship with Mom or Lily. I was mourning the idea of what I thought our family was supposed to be. Angela helped me see that I didn't need their validation to heal. I could set boundaries, create my own version of closure, and build a life that didn't revolve around their approval. I started focusing on myself in a way I hadn't before. I picked up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. Not seriously, but enough to remind myself that Ryan wasn't the end-all be-all. Slowly, the weight of the past began to lift. But healing isn't linear, and some days were harder than others. I'd still catch myself wondering if Mom missed me, if she regretted cutting me off. But every time those thoughts crept in, I reminded myself of something Angela had said. You can't control other people's actions, only your response to them. And my response? It was to keep moving forward, even if they stayed behind. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel normal, or at least a new version of it. My mornings were no longer weighed down by the ache of betrayal, and the suffocating silence from my family stopped cutting so deep. Therapy helped, as did the unwavering support of my friends. I'd created a new rhythm for myself, one where I didn't look to my mom or sister for approval or validation. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. There were still moments, late at night or in the quiet of a Sunday morning, when the pain resurfaced. I'd think about Mom's laugh, about the smell of her cooking on Thanksgiving. I'd remember the way Lily used to sneak into my room at night when we were kids, whispering secrets and sharing dreams. Those memories were the hardest to let go of because they reminded me of what I'd lost, or what I thought I'd had. Then, one evening, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. Can we meet? Please. It's Mom. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. I hadn't heard from her in over 6 months. Part of me wanted to delete the message and move on. Another part, the part still craving answers, wanted to see her. After agonizing over it for hours, I finally replied, "Where's?" She suggested a cafe not far from my apartment, and the next day, I found myself sitting across from her at a corner table. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if my absence had weighed on her as much as hers had on me. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. She fidgeted with the edge of her scarf, her eyes darting around the room before finally settling on mine. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About everything."
And
I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. She winced but didn't look away. "I handled it badly. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I see now that I wasn't. I didn't consider how much this would hurt you, and for that I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of months of silence. I searched her face for sincerity, and to my surprise, I found it. But an apology wasn't enough to erase the damage. "I needed you," I said, my voice trembling. "And you chose her. You chose them." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing. She needed my support. But I didn't realize how much you needed it too. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." Hearing her admit she was wrong was a small victory, but it didn't bring the relief I thought it would. "You didn't just hurt me," I said. "You pushed me out. Do you know what that felt like? To hear my own mother say I wasn't welcome anymore." Her tears spilled over, and she reached across the table to take my hand. I hesitated before letting her. "I've missed you every day," she said, her voice breaking. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try to make things right." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to grab onto the hope that we could fix things. But trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip. "What about Lily's?" I asked, pulling my hand back. "Does she even care about what she's done?" Mom hesitated, and I knew the answer before she said it. "She doesn't see it the way you do. She thinks you're holding on to something that should be in the past." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Of course she does. She gets what she wants, and I'm just supposed to roll over and let it happen." "She's stubborn," Mom admitted. "But she loves you. She's just not good at showing it." "That's not love," I said firmly. "What she did to me isn't love." Mom didn't argue. She just sat there, her face a mask of regret. We talked for a while longer, circling the same topics without really finding a resolution. When we finally parted, she hugged me tightly, whispering, "I hope we can fix this." The meeting with Mom left me with more questions than answers. I couldn't stop replaying our conversation, wondering if her apology was enough to rebuild the bridge she'd burned. Part of me wanted to believe it was, but another part, the part that had learned to live without her, wasn't so sure. A week later, Lily reached out. Her text was blunt, almost accusatory. "Mom said you talked. Are you ready to stop being dramatic and come back to the families?" I stared at the message, feeling the anger bubble up again.
she hadn't changed.
She hadn't even tried to understand. For her, it was all about maintaining the status quo, about pretending everything was fine. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to Angela, my therapist, and we talked through it. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," she said. "You can forgive your mom, or even Lily, without letting them back into your life the same way." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I'd thought forgiveness meant giving them a second chance, but maybe it didn't. Maybe forgiveness was something I did for myself, not for them. Over time, I found a balance. I let Mom back in, cautiously, setting firm boundaries about what I would and wouldn't tolerate. She didn't always get it right, but she tried, and that effort meant something. Lily, on the other hand, stayed at a distance. I didn't block her out completely, but I didn't go out of my way to mend things either. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. As for Ryan, he became a ghost, a name I no longer allowed to hold power over me. Whatever love I'd once felt for him had long since withered, replaced by a quiet indifference. The holidays came and went, and though they looked different than they had in the past, they were peaceful. I spent them with friends who felt more like family than my own did. In the end, I learned that family isn't always the people you're born with. Sometimes it's the people who choose you, who show up for you, who love you without conditions. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free to live my life on my terms, without the shadow of their expectations hanging over me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving.